The role of citizen in our democracy does not end with your vote. America's never been about what can be done for us. It's about what can be done by us together through the hard and frustrating but necessary work of self-government. That's the principle we were founded on.
That was President Obama in Chicago on the night he was reelected, calling on the American people to stay involved. And he meant it. This week, he has been taking his case directly to the American people. And it is making some folks lose their minds.
Wait a minute, Becky. When's the next election, Becky? When's the next election?
2 years.
Okay, so why does he need to pump up his base and go on the road? He won. What is this for? It's reprehensible.
No, my point,
that people go to Charlotte and say fairness, and then they run to try to beat the tax man, which is predicated on
he's doing his job. He's doing his job as a corporate executive. No, he's doing his job.
I can't even talk about it anymore.
Woo! Joining our panel is MSNBC contributor Ari Melber, who's a correspondent for The Nation magazine and an author of a report about how the OFA campaign tried to turn its grassroots network into a governing force in the president's first term. Ari, nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
So despite the drama that it is causing, the president is going directly to the folks. Now, this is something they were criticized on kind of between 2008 and 2012. What's it going to look like now? Is the president going to be able to use their base?
I think it depends on what they ask them to do. The report that I wrote interviewed dozens of OFA activists, talked to campaign staff and people on Capitol Hill in both parties. Yep. And what I found was that they became basically a single issue group around health care, which was both exciting to many people because this was a promise that the president was looking to deliver on, but also didn't give them a lot of meaningful asks. What we talk about when you're doing a campaign is what's the ask, and early on it might be getting supporter cards or signing up people to events, and later it's GOTV. It's very clear. And I don't think it's any fault of the White House to note that it gets a lot less clear when you talk about healthcare negotiations or even the fiscal cliff. So the first thing they did, to your question, and I spoke to some people at the White House about it this week, is they tried to get the base, the activists here, involved in the persuasion campaign around the fiscal cliff. So they have an infogram, they have information that shares on Facebook. Teddy Goff, who's one of the digital directors of the campaign, has noted that when they want to talk to people on Facebook, they reach 10 million with any content that they consider pretty good. That's how big the footprint is. So that's the first thing they're doing, Melissa. The harder question comes next, which is if you don't have the things work out on the fiscal cliff, or if Joe Biden gavels in the Senate and you don't get a deal on the filibuster to actually stop the obstruction, do you bring them in to do something more confrontational?
So let's just take a look, because I also want to bring Laura in on this. She was anticipating some of these, exactly these arguments, particularly around progressives. So if you look at the chart that you generated here of national OFA emails, so this is when it goes from Obama for America to Organizing for America, and we see that it is primarily about health care. You get this big spike. There's some work going on here about Sotomayor, about economy and the budget, some around the community. But it's clear that kind of that big blue spike, MHP blue spike there is really around health care, right? That's what those emails were about. This week we saw the emails, Laura, were send out your hashtag My2K tweets. But then we watched that get immediately hijacked. So Speaker Boehner becomes the guy tweeting on My2K and tweets, right, that the House GOP voted to stop My2K tax rate hikes and defend small businesses. What spending will Dems cut to stop the fiscal cliff, with all its, attendant hashtags? Is this an effective organizing strategy? Tweet it, email it.
Well, I mean, it depends what you want to do, exactly as Ari said. Tweeting and Facebooking and all that stuff is great to activate people to do things. But the question is what things, and what happens to your actual on-the-grass organizing? What we've seen time after time is that on-the-ground organizing has to do with having an effect locally on a local issue, being able to influence your local media, your local politicians. That's one of the things that I think those who are freaking out about why is Obama continuing the campaign fail to understand. it's not as if decisions that we focus on in Washington are not affected by what is happening locally. The right has known this forever. So to organize people at the base, to influence their local media and their local officials and local opinion is important. But again, I want to go back to the health debate where a lot of those local activists wanted single payer.
Yeah, they wanted something more.
Health care with the profit motive taken out. In this case, same thing. What have we seen this week? Massive organizing around retail workers, massive organizing over the Thanksgiving period by Walmart, a big emphasis on unemployment, but also minimum wages. The Obama administration may get more than they bargained for.
Just briefly, though,
Yeah, sure.
I want to second what you said, because you showed the clip of Mr. Santelli.
Yeah.
That's the same Mr. Santelli who took to the floor and gave a big speech that was part of the genesis of the Tea Party outrage.
Yep.
The best thing about the Tea Party was that they were working on governance.
Yeah.
There was an issue on the Hill that they wanted to speak to. I don't agree with all their tactics.
That's right.
But it's very good when we have people come up and say, let's get involved in policy. And it's harder than a campaign, because campaigns are just more fun to most people.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
you have debates and you have built-in earned media.
And you have a clear outcome. You have an election day and you have an outcome. Dan,
as interesting as it is to energize the base, and I think that's important, what's also important, at least to me, considering after the election we got from Boehner, for example, he wanted to bring the ACA back into the negotiations for some wild reason, and you still see the same kind of intransigence, is to go out and say, hey, wait a minute, who won this election here?
Yeah, yeah.
And just stand there and say, wait, this mandate is mine. I earned it. 3%. I won a national vote by 3%, which in modern times is a landslide, as close to a landslide. We won seats in the Senate. We took seats in the House in spite of gerrymandering.
Yeah, I was going to say, and in the House, if there were no partisan gerrymandering, there'd also be a Democratic. Yeah,
I am, and that's I think that's as important as energizing the base and getting to move for you in social media and so forth.
But I mean, at the same time, they've got to actually get a number of votes, right? They need 218 votes in the House, and part of the art of Washington politics is giving your opponent something to run against you on in the next election, right? So what they've got to give House Republicans is something they can take back to these very conservative gerrymandered districts. I mean, we forget that, it's not as if most people are running in swing districts. Most of these folks are running in really hard right districts where they could still get a primary challenge. So the reason you're hearing Boehner constantly ask, what are you going to cut? They want the president to put some unpopular ideas publicly out on the table, too.
Sure.
Because right now, all of the blame, all of the negativity, all of the bad ideas, the ideas of voucherizing Medicare, the ideas of raising the retirement
to them.
age, they're all coming from the Republican Party. So they're espousing all the ideas people hate. They want the president to put some unpopular ideas out there. And he has no incentive to do so right now.
We're going to come right back, because there is a character here, a Luca Brasi character of the anti-tax campaign. No official leadership role, but a brutal character. Yes, Grover Norquist. Is his clout finally starting to sleep with the fishes? That's next.